so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. And that's T.J. Inman. We're here to break down, believe it or not, you're not making this up, Indiana's first round college football playoff game at Notre Dame on Friday night at 8 o'clock. It'll be broadcast on ABC and ESPN. It is a standalone playoff game on Friday night, so that's pretty cool. First college football playoff game on campus, which is also pretty cool. And we're here to break it all down. We're not going to talk about the portal. We're not going to talk about coaching changes, all the stuff that has been absolutely crazy for college football in the last couple of weeks. We are not talking about it. It's straight college football playoff and Notre Dame. But TJ, who would have thought that we'd be breaking down college football playoff this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's been a very, very enjoyable, fun ride that you just have to kind of, keep pinching yourself to remind you that I use in this position. And they've earned it. It has been lots of outside noise about strength of schedule and who have they played, and all of that has worked itself out. There are fair kind of, not criticisms, but fair points to be made that Indiana has not played the toughest schedule in the world, but they've taken care of the business that has been put in front of them each and every week. And there's a lot to be said for that because very few teams did. So they've earned their way here, and they get that matchup with Notre Dame. The in-state implications are there. Kind of in the game week preview, you have the what's at stake section, and you can get lost in kind of the specifics of the matchup, but you have to come back to what's at stake is a chance at a national championship.
Yep.
Indiana is in the tournament that decides who the national champion is for college football.
Yep.
There are no other stakes. That's the whole thing. That's why everybody plays this sport.
Yep. Yeah, I mean the highest stakes possible. Of course, there's other implications. You have,
right,
supremacy in the state of Indiana with Notre Dame, and you don't get Indiana has not had many shots at Notre Dame. This is the first time they've met, I believe, since 1990 or 91.
91.
Since 91, and it's a shot at the best. The historically best program in the state and one of the historically best programs in the sport.
Yep.
But let's take a look at how IU got here. And we'll start in fall camp because I wrote about that today, that there was always a sense of belief within the team that that they had something special cooking in fall camp. And we said in all our previews that we need to see what this team is. That, Kirk Cignetti brought in over 50 players, including his transfer class and incoming recruits and all that, and it was just some key players didn't play in spring practice. You also don't add a guy like CJ West until after spring portal, so it was very much let's see what they have. Against FIU, they looked okay. They won handily, 31-7. It was a ho hum. You sweat because it was 100 degrees, but there was no stress sweating that game at all. But the players talked about it yesterday. Around week 1 or 2 of spring or fall camp, they begin to see how good they were. The offense is moving the ball in practice, defense is making plays. People are bought in, and you start to believe that, okay, we're good enough to do this, at least internally. And then you have a guy at the helm like Signetti, who's not going to back down from any challenges, but his players bought into his belief. Western Illinois comes in week two, you drop a program record 77 points on them. Again, no sweat victory. Prove it game out at UCLA was one of the toss ups we talk about. You go out there and handle
Hmm.
business. You come home, well, it might be a letdown game against Charlotte.
Right.
Had a little bit of a letdown at the beginning of the game, ended up winning that game, by 30 plus points.
Yep.
But all of a sudden, the ball starts rolling. And every challenge, well, now they got it, Maryland. Well, they took care of Maryland. Now you got to go up to Northwestern and do it on the road again. Beat Northwestern. Well, now you have Nebraska, the best defense in the country. Put 56 up on them. Um, and the belief kept on building
Yep.
up until you get to 10-0. Ultimately, you finish the season 11-1 with the bad taste of, and this is where I think people are all pointing to, well, the only ranked team that IU's played was Ohio State, and they got beat, and you can say they got beat badly. It was more that they looked bad in losing than they totally got dominated, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It was a drop punt snap. It was they couldn't block defensive line. It was, you know, all the things that you thought, IU might be able to handle in the moment, they didn't. But that moment has been circled as a learning, lessons learned, and we'll see.
Right.
Look, Ohio State was super loud. There's 105,000 people. Notre Dame only holds about 70, 77, 75,000. It's going to be loud. It's going to be electric atmosphere. They have great fans, but the bowl of their stadium, it should not be as loud as Ohio State. Plus, college football playoffs running I think all the in-game audio and that stuff.
Hmm.
So we'll see. But yeah, what are your takes on the season? When did you start thinking, hey, this might be possible? Do you still think, or are you still
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
pinch me? It hasn't
Right.
happened yet.
Right. Yeah. I do catch myself in that position sometimes, but um, I- the first time that I thought, hey, I need to raise what I thought was possible, which going into the season, I said I'll be pleased with the bowl game. Um, beat Purdue and go to a bowl game. The first time that I felt like I was watching a team that was a lot better than that was against Charlotte. Um, when they did not play well for the first stretch of that game, and then a switch flipped, and it did not turn into a stressful second half where, oh, went to UCLA, got a big win, came home, and then, just fell flat in your face to give away all momentum. Instead of doing that, they just blew Charlotte out. And really, there was not any stress during the second half of that game.
No.
Um, so that told me they didn't play great and blew out a team in a situation that in the past, IU football would have made it at the very least
Okay.
interesting in a bad way. That was the first time that I thought, oh, okay, I think I can raise what ceiling I have in my head a little bit. And the first time that I thought playoff was a legitimate possibility was that Nebraska game.
Yeah, me
That
too.
that they uh, that was as dominant of a performance over a competent Big Ten team that Indiana football has had in my lifetime. Um, I
Yeah,
can't
and then
speak before that necessarily, but Nebraska, not good, but Nebraska's competent. They are a competent team. They got to a bowl game, and at that point, they were playing quite well.
they were
And
5-1.
Indiana blew the doors off
Yep,
in a
and then
big spot. And that was the first time I thought, okay, it's not a pipe dream.
Yeah, and they backed it up. I think, the Curtis Rourke injury kind of makes it say, with Florida State, they might keep you out if he's hurt. But they came back against Washington the next week, um, with a backup quarterback and controlled that game for the majority of the game. And they looked good on offense. They
Oh
ran the
yeah.
ball. They did what they needed to do. And that's when it was like, okay, even if Curtis Rourke is out for a game or two, you feel pretty good about getting through the latter half of the schedule. And if you could get through it with one loss, probably going to the playoff. And that's what happened. So let's break down this game.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the things we're going to talk about is the weather in South Bend, and there's that lake effect snow
Hmm.
that's in the forecast. And look, I spent 2 winters in Buffalo. Lake effect snow, it's super localized. On mile down the road, you could have 4 feet of snow, and where you are, there's 6 inches. But the forecast right now, 33% chance of snow. It's going to be cold, um, probably very similar to the Purdue weather. So you feel kind of comfortable that IU could perform in it. They've done it. You've seen it. Now, look, Purdue is Purdue, and they stink. And Notre Dame is Notre Dame, and they're hosting a playoff game, so they got to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And their game is geared toward we could bash your brains in, whether it's snowing, raining, hailing, basically anything but lightning. So let's dive into the
Yeah.
running game, TJ.
Yeah. On the weather front, for lack of a better term, uh, you are hoping if you're Indiana that you do not have really wet, whether that's rain or heavy snow, and you're hoping that it's not real windy.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not going to rain. It's going to be cold enough where it's not going to
yeah,
rain.
yeah, so that you don't have a really wet, heavy ball from the snow that makes grip difficult. And the big thing is going to be, is there wind gusts that make it difficult to throw the ball because that makes Indiana more likely to be one-dimensional. Notre Dame does not mind. They would be perfectly fine if every single play was a running play in this game. Um, so that's where the weather could come into play. It's going to be cold for both teams. Both teams are from the state of Indiana. That part doesn't really matter on the field. For those who will be in attendance, obviously be prepared. Um, the running game for Notre Dame, they've got kind of a trio of guys you have to be aware of. The two running backs, Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, both averaging over 7 yards per carry. And then Riley Leonard, the quarterback, very good runner on his own. 14 rushing touchdowns this season. Uh, Very effective as a playmaker. He could extend plays on passing plays. He can also get outside the pocket and make plays. And then they'll run some design scrambles for him, especially in the red zone. Um, how Indiana approaches that, we heard a very good kind of uh, idea from Bryant Haynes that they know Notre Dame's going to run the ball with Riley Leonard. That's part of their offense. What you want to do is make him pay the toll every time he runs it. Obviously, that means you are playing physically with Riley Leonard and making him think twice about how many times Notre Dame's going to run him on
Yeah, and
Friday
they
night.
run him about on average 10 times a game.
Yep,
He's their second leading yardage runner. Um, his vision as a runner is unbelievable. It
he's
is
great.
almost, yeah, he's almost like got running back vision as a quarterback. He's
Yes,
deceptively fast and quick. When that pocket collapses, he could get on the outside and get you 7, 8, 9 yards or even more, if you don't play contain. Um, how does IU stop this? Even Brian Haynes says you don't stop it.
right.
How do you make him pay the toll? Do you spy Jalen Walker on him? Do
That's
you,
the thought, right? Terry
yeah,
Jones or Jalen Walker as a spy. Um, are you going to see three linebacker sets more often from Indiana? I think so. I think that we will see an increased number of snaps that you'll have Fisher, Walker. and Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy, um, additional linebacker put into the game specifically for the purpose, one, of the running game, but two, as a spy on Riley Leonard.
Yeah,
Um, and a reason that you can do that, you hope, is that you feel good about your secondary going against Notre Dame's receivers.
yeah, and I was going to bring that up too. And we saw it against Ohio State. They picked on poor Linnell Carr, who's on one of their top wide receivers, and I don't think that Notre Dame's wide receivers are as good as Ohio State's or as athletic as
That's
maybe.
a very fair statement. I mean, look, we're not going to insult these guys. They are good players. They are not
Jeremiah Smith.
Emeka Ibuka, Jeremiah Smith. Now, what they do have is pretty good physicality in the wide
Yep.
receiver room, and they do a good job getting the ball to the tight end. That's not a surprise if you've watched Notre Dame anytime in the past decade. Uh, Tight end is going to be a part of their offense. Um, so Indiana does have to be kind of leery of that. But you look at Riley Leonard's passing numbers, um, complete 66.2% of his passes. That's good, but he's only averaging 7.1 yards per attempt. They're not going to stretch the field very often vertically in the passing game. They'll take a few shots, but uh, it is not going to be kind of very many deep shots down the field. You're going to look at Riley Leonard probably if Notre Dame has it their way. He is probably going to throw it 20 times
He
if
averages,
Notre Dame has it their way.
yeah, which
Um,
is slightly below average. He
yeah,
averages about 24 throws a game, but if you add in the weather,
right.
the strength of the offense for Notre Dame against the strength of defense for IU, you look at the run game Ohio State had. I look, Jeremiah Love is great, and their running backs are great, but uh, Henderson and Quinton Judkins, I would say it's probably even in talent. They're four very,
Yeah,
very good running backs.
yeah.
Jeremiah Love might be the best of the bunch of them,
I
but
would I would pick him. Yeah, but you're right. It's a good and this is the big thing, right? Indiana's rush defense, second in the country in yards per carry allowed. Notre Dame, second in the country in yards per carry on offense, behind only New Mexico, who has an incredible athlete in Devin Dampier at quarterback that elevates that, and it's partially New Mexico's scheme as well. But um, the bottom line is Indiana really, really good on defense against the run. Notre Dame really, really good on offense running the ball. That's that's the matchup that everybody's been pointing to, understandably, because it dovetails into so many different things. If Notre Dame is able to consistently run the ball for 5 yards a carry, they will be able to sustain drives. They will be able to keep IU's offense out of rhythm and on the bench, and that
yeah,
will wear down Indiana's defense over time and lead to a Notre Dame victory. I feel fairly confident saying that if Notre Dame can exceed 5 yards a carry, they would have a very, very good chance to win that game comfortably.
yes,
The thing that could, turn that is, hey, they averaged 5.5 yards a carry, but every time they got to the red zone, they fumbled, and IU recovered all of them. Well, okay, sure, that's true, but barring really good turnover luck for Indiana, Notre Dame running it for above 5 yards a carry all night uh, would be a recipe that would move Notre Dame to the Sugar Bowl.
yeah. And I wanted to get into red zone offense and red zone defense because just like Notre Dame's rush offense and IU's rush defense, they're both very good. IU's red zone offense is near the top of the nation. They scored over, I think, 95% of the time. And
Yep.
but Notre Dame's red zone defense, they've only allowed 30 trips to the red zone. Um, not a lot of scores. And this is a game where Indiana is going to have to score touchdowns and not field goals. And
Yep.
on, on the inverse side, Notre Dame's kicker is kind of banged up. It looked like he got injured in the win at Stanford. He didn't play the next two games, hasn't hit a field goal since November 9th. He's been perfect on his extra points, but hasn't hit a field goal since the beginning of November. He looks shaky. This might be a game where, you know, just slightly outside of the red zone, Notre Dame's going to be aggressive and trying to get that first down on fourth down instead of kicking it, especially if the weather is going to be windy and snowy. But,
Right.
If IU could score touchdowns, keep Notre Dame to field goals, that's the recipe for success. Notre Dame's lone loss this year to Northern Illinois. That's what happens. Notre Dame had to kick field goals. They turned the ball over. Now they held Northern Illinois a lot of times in the red zone, but ultimately it came down to a block field goal at the end. That's
Hmm.
also something that Notre Dame does well. They had 6 block kicks on the season
Yep.
as well. This game is going to be one on the margins. We're used to playing on the margins in previous years, but that's the stuff that IU does well this year. They, outside of the Ohio State game, they did not beat themselves. Whether that's penalties, allowing block kicks, and things like that. So to me,
Yeah.
red zone offense, I use red zone offense against Notre Dame's red zone defense is, I think, dictates the game. Of course, you can limit those opportunities if they run for 5 yards of carry, but man, if IU can score points in the red zone, they should be in business.
Yeah. And you look at, okay, where can Indiana exploit some things with Notre Dame? Um, and it's another thing that comes back to that running game. Indiana's offense needs to be on the field so that they can go after that secondary. It's a good secondary, but if you're asking, okay, where can IU find some matchups that they might like? I think Indiana's passing game, if they can give Curtis Rourke time, which we don't know. We saw problems against blitzes with Ohio State and Michigan. That was solved against Purdue, but that doesn't tell you anything because the athletes that Purdue was sending you is not what Notre Dame is going to present on Friday night. So
No,
we don't know if IU has had enough time or if they just have the horses to solve that particular problem. But if you can give Curtis Rourke time, and if Mike Shanahan can scheme some ways to get the ball out quickly, then you look at Indiana's wide receivers, Omar Cooper, Keyshawn Williams, Miles Price, Elijah Surratt. We know the pass catching depth and dangerousness that IU's offense has. Notre Dame's pass defense numbers look pretty good, but look at the passing offenses that they've played, and the ones that you would say are pretty competent have caused them some problems. Louisville caused them some problems. USC caused
USC.
them a lot of issues. Now, the weather's not going to be as good as it was in LA, obviously, but if the weather cooperates, Indiana will have the opportunity to move the ball on that Notre Dame secondary. A lot of their passing numbers, I feel like, uh, are inflated some based on the two games against service academies. When they played Navy, their quarterback Horvath was banged up, two injured thumbs. He couldn't do much of anything, and it showed. Uh, you had those games. You had Georgia Tech with the banged up Haynes King. You had Florida State that had given up already. So there were some games there that I think inflated Notre Dame's passing defense numbers. The ones that played comparable offensive quality to what IU will throw at Notre Dame, the Irish had some trouble with those passing attacks. So that's an opportunity, I think, for IU's offense to move the ball, but you've got to be on the field to do it.
Yeah,
And the biggest concern, I think, is Notre Dame just dominating time of possession.
Yeah, and you got to look at the issue at Ohio State was the silent count. Ohio State timed it
Right.
up. It was kind of obvious once you saw it on film and on the tablets. They would guard would hit the center on the leg, ball would be snapped. Pretty easy to time up. So maybe you start running some draws. Maybe they don't have to go to a silent count. It's going to be loud, but it's a different kind. The way that stadium is set up, it's kind of like Michigan, where the noise just kind of floats out a little bit. But maybe you don't have to go to the silent count. Maybe they fix the silent count and do something different. But there's different ways to kind of throw off that defense. But you're right. You go and look at the games where they struggled against teams who pass. Georgia Tech threw for 269 yards. Yeah, they threw two interceptions. Louisville, 24-41 for 264, three touchdowns and a pick. Southern Cal, 27 of 49 for 360 yards. You go to even Northern Illinois. Yeah, they didn't throw the ball that much and they only completed 50% of their passes, but it was for 198 yards with the passer rating of one. And that was the worst. That was the highest passer rating that they've given up all year was 149.66 um, against Northern Illinois. So if you're an IU fan, you got to hope that the win is manageable and that either you're leaving an extra blocker in with Horton or maybe even James Bamba at tight end and giving Curtis Rourke time because I do think these IU receivers, especially Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams, can give the Notre Dame secondary issues. I do think IU has better athletes at receiver, um, but we'll see if it's blizzard-like conditions. It's going to be tough to throw. We've seen Curtis Rourke's throws affected by the wind against Maryland
Sure.
and even against Purdue and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the that's one to watch as we turn to, you know, what's the recipe for Indiana to win this game? Uh, there's lots of different ways. It will not take a absolutely perfect showing by Indiana to get this done. They will have to play very, very well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is really interesting, it's not a surprise, both teams have been really good in turnover margin.
Yep.
Both are top five on the season in turnover margin per game. They're both winning that battle by more than one turnover per contest all season on average. So
Yeah. The 3-4 in the
something
country.
something's you would think going to give there, or is it just neither team's going to make a mistake on offense that costs them? Neither team is going to is going to have a turnover. With the weather the way that it is, and with these two playmaking defenses, I find that unlikely. So it's finding a way to win that turnover battle, finding a way to prevent Notre Dame from dominating time of possession. Um, that's going to come from limiting that running game. You're not going to stop it, but limiting that running game. I think getting them off schedule, putting them into obvious passing situations, and then when you get that opportunity to bring down Riley Leonard in the backfield and prevent him from breaking contain, you've got to do it.
Yep.
If you have an opportunity to get Leonard down, say it's a third and medium, and Notre Dame is passing, and you get pressure and don't get home and make that play, those opportunities will cost you the game if you can't make those plays. Because Leonard, if he can break contain and get away from a couple of pass rushers, he'll probably make a play with his feet, extend the drive, and then you've given Notre Dame more opportunity to score. So I think those are kind of the things that I feel will directly impact whether or not IU can pull off this upset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my mind automatically went to the, what it was, at 3rd and 35 against Ohio State, where it
Oh
looked
yeah,
like you had
Yeah,
Will Howard sacked and he scrambles out, gets 20 yards on third down. They get the first down on
yep,
fourth down, and that kind of started to
has that.
change the tide there.
Yeah,
Now, IU ultimately stopped him at the goal line, but that was the oh, might be in trouble.
that hasn't happened yet. Yeah,
Yeah,
that kind
that
of thing.
hasn't happened. Their athletes might be better than ours,
Sure.
and stuff like that. So, uh, let's get into we talk keys to victory. Um, Matchup to watch. Is it prediction time, TJ?
It's prediction time. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that anyone, I know this, nobody knows how either team is going to handle the pressure and the atmosphere that's going to be there on Friday night. We haven't seen it before. This has never happened. This will be the first ever on campus college football playoff game. Will that mean anything once the ball is kicked off?
Well, in
I
the
don't know.
FBS.
True. That's true. Yes, I should have clarified that. Yes, that is true. So, how is that going to play out once the ball gets kicked off? Is it going to mean anything at all to the players? Are they going to feel that at all? Don't know. We do not have a way to predict that. What we can predict is Indiana and the matchups that they have, Notre Dame and the matchups that they have of all of the first round potential opponents that Indiana could have faced. I think that this is the one that you would say that's going to be very, very difficult, but we have to play somebody, and it was going to have to be on the road. Okay, we'll we'll take that opportunity. That's that's my feeling. That's not being disrespectful of Notre Dame. They have earned the position that they are in with their play. Yeah, they lost to Northern Illinois, but they've also pretty much killed everybody since that time.
Yep.
Um, they've earned to be in this spot, but you got to play somebody that's really good. And I think Indiana probably matches up better with them than they would have with somebody else that they could have drawn. Um, so given that, the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is Indiana not being able to get into rhythm on offense because Notre Dame just grinds down the clock with a lot of third and short conversions. That's my biggest area of concern is that their running game will just be a little bit too big and physical for Indiana's rush defense. It's something that I think IU doesn't really have a way around. Ultimately, this is what Notre Dame does, and I don't think that they're going to be phased by playing that style of game if that's what the weather forces. Um, Now, I also think that this Indiana team is going to play their best game of the season. Um, I think that there is something to be said for Curtis Rourke having a little bit of extra time to get his thumb as healed as it's going to be. The bumps and the bruises that they had after playing Ohio State and Michigan have had time to heal. And I think you give this coaching staff a lot of time to prepare. I feel good about what they're going to cook up and what they learned against Ohio State and from that experience. So I think you're going to see Indiana's best shot put forward at Notre Dame. And this is my heart talking more than my head. But I think Indiana will win this game. I'm going to go with Indiana winning it. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. Indiana wins 24-21.
All right. You talk about pressure on the teams, and we've talked about Ohio State too much this podcast, but you look at the storylines coming out of there that maybe they're better off playing on the road after losing to Michigan, and the fan base is toxic and all that stuff. Um, I think there's a lot more pressure on Notre Dame than Indiana. Indiana
Oh,
was
yeah.
not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that they're happy to be here, but you're playing with house money.
Yeah.
Um, and that is freeing. I think it's all the pressures on Notre Dame. You're at home. You're Notre Dame playing Indiana football. You're supposed to win. You're supposed to kick their butts, and all that stuff. You have, the whole Notre Dame hasn't won a big game in what since 1988, and stuff like that. I hope that they come out in black or green jerseys, um, from not as like a traditional football fan because I'd be super disappointed because part of the allure of going to see a game at Notre Dame is the
Yeah,
uniform, but to
that blue
come
and
out,
gold.
yeah, great. You want to wear your alternate uniforms? Go ahead. You usually stink on them. Um, one of the biggest mysteries is how many IU fans are going to be up there. That's nobody knows. You have Jeremy Gray on Twitter saying there are going to be thousands. You have Notre Dame saying control the noise and putting out towels, and you got this silly towel war going on, as well. But nobody really knows
Right.
outside of until you get there, how many IU fans are going to be there? I don't know. I know that they released what 3,500 tickets to IU and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But if this game is close early, Notre Dame's going to get tight. And we've seen it. We've seen it in a lot of games with Notre Dame. We saw it with Ohio State against Michigan. The team who has the pressure, if this game is close and not going as they expected,
Yeah.
people clam up. That's what happens. No
You
matter
feel it,
how,
right? You
yeah,
feel it.
yeah,
You feel it in
oh
the
yeah,
stadium. Yeah.
yep. I mean the best comp, and now it doesn't have the stakes, but when Micah McFadden gets ejected against Cincinnati, you felt the air leave the stadium, and that's something that happens in these big games in every sport. You come out, oh, you fumble the ball or something like that. IU's got to get. There are two big things to do for this game in terms of just weathering the storm and not the literal weather, but weathering. Get through the first 4 minutes of the first quarter. Um, do that. Get through the first drive each. It's going to be electric. It's going to be loud. Let the game settle in. After that, it's the middle 8 minutes. The last 4 minutes of the second quarter, first 4 minutes of the third quarter. That's where you lost to Ohio State. That's where you dropped the punt snap, and had the bad punt that led to a touchdown return. Outside of that, you're playing even with Ohio State for most
Mhm.
of the game. Um, Control those. Those are momentum times. If you could get, if you could get the 2-for-1 score going into halftime, you feel pretty good. Um, I got burned by picking IU over Ohio State. Don't know if I want to do it again, TJ. I don't know. I do have faith in this IU team. I think Mitch Jeter's injury, um, could come up big, especially if it's a close game and you need a
Sure.
field goal to win if you're Notre Dame. Are you going to run him out there for something over 40 yards? You just don't know. Um, and the weather is going to be a big factor in it. I'm just filibustering until I don't have to make a pick. Um, yeah, you know what? Indiana's not in playoff very often. I'm going to go Indiana 24, Notre Dame 17.
Yeah.
Actually, that doesn't make sense.
The good news is whatever we say
Doesn't
really
matter.
has not
Yeah.
have any impact. If this is going to be used as bulletin board material for anybody, then they've got bigger problems than this game on
If
Friday
you
night.
if you want to use this as bulletin board material, please send us a check for our name, image, and likeness, and you're
Yeah.
more than welcome
Yeah.
to put it
Or
up on the scoreboard or
yeah. Or
anything like that.
subscribe and add Hoosier
Why?
Huddle, all that. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, all that stuff. I'm actually going to change my score. I don't think Notre Dame gets a field goal. Um, I'm going to go 17-14 IU. I do think the weather is going to play a factor. Notre Dame's going to run the ball. Indiana's running game is pretty good too.
Yeah.
With Tyson
Yeah.
Lawton and Justice Ellison, but you also saw some wrinkles in the run game with Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams in that
Yeah.
short passing game, getting to the outside against Purdue. Now, you and me probably could get to the outside against Purdue on some of these plays, but
Of
yeah,
note. we both went well under the total. So I
Yes, I
think that
do
we both
think
probably feel like this will be more of a
limited possession game.
defensive limited possession game than perhaps the total, which is in the 50s, would suggest the line of thinking is, which I understand given the offenses of both teams. But yeah, I think in terms of game flow, you're looking at limited possessions
Yeah, I could see
type
both
of
teams
of
scoring
outing.
early, like scoring a touchdown early on their first drives and feeling each other out, and then defense making adjustments. But yeah, I think they limit possessions.
Yeah.
I think that's what Notre Dame wants to do too. That's how their offense is geared running the ball. So maybe instead of 11 possessions for each team, you get somewhere between 8 and 9. Um, and these two defenses are too good to give up many more points than that. So I'll take IU 17, Notre Dame 14. I could be completely wrong, but
It is written. All right, we're going to the Sugar Bowl. Good. We decided it. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
so we'll see. Obviously, soak it up, everybody. This is an experience that we cannot take for granted. So, Indiana, Friday night in South Bend, 8 o'clock on ABC. Uh, we'll have continuing coverage on the site, this podcast, the Gamer, matchup to watch, stories on offense and defense, players, quotes, coach quotes. We got everything there. And of course, uh, we will also have Portal Combat coverage as that will take center stage as soon as the games are actually over. But until that happens, we're going to focus on the team that's on the field.
yep. And some PSAs, TJ, for those either traveling to South Bend or those who weren't lucky enough or fortunate enough to get tickets to it. In Bloomington, Upstairs Pub is doing a whole game day. They have a brunch club from 11 and 2. They have a pregame party from 5 to 8. They have some awesome shirts that are going to be released at 5 p.m. Of course, kickoffs at 8. Um, Social Cantina in Mishawaka is hosting a pregame party. You have Big Red Kickoff is hosting a pregame party as well. Check Home Field. Home Field's Twitter account has the link to all the IU Alumni Association watch parties. They won't advertise us, but I will advertise them. They have a link to the nationwide um, whatever branch of alumni association you are with IU. And if they're having a watch party, they have all the information there. So enjoy it. It is a unique opportunity. Enjoy the game. And, whatever happens, this doesn't matter what happens next year. It didn't matter what happened in previous years. Enjoy it. And, hopefully the success continues into the future. And we'll have you all covered. You can find us on Twitter at Hoosier_Huddle, at Blue Sky as well, and then Facebook, YouTube, like, rate, subscribe. Um, and if you are going to the game, drive safely. If it is bad weather, drive safely, listen to the podcast, and enjoy it.